Unknown event causes all
Can you speak
iguana
louder?
lizard. Yes.
Thank you.
In the year 2021, an unknown event causes all iguana lizards everywhere to suddenly become sentient, human-sized, intelligent lizard men. In America alone, lizard men suddenly make up 5% of the population. Due to their intelligence, many lizards call for greater freedom and several civil rights which they have been denied in the past, including protection from workplace discrimination, the right to vote, and the right to own property. These lizard rights activists are collectively known as the lizard resistance movement. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Americans, in fact the majority of all humans, carry a deep prejudice against lizards. Despite statistical evidence that the vast majority of lizards are peaceful and want to be productive members of society, 85% of Americans feel that lizard men hate America, are unwilling to integrate into society, do not want to work, and do not deserve the same rights as humans. As a result, lizards are denied pretty much all basic rights, including the right to vote. Congress also passes a law which prevents employers from hiring a lizard over a human being, marginalizing the lizard community, and creating a secluded underground black market lizard economy. By the year 2022, 65% of lizard men live in abject poverty in large slums in the outskirts of cities in the southern United States. Over time, however, lizards begin to slowly gain rights. By 2023, for example, lizard murder and kidnapping are made illegal, and lizards are given at least a few basic legal rights. Sorry, that's redundant. In general, though, the pace of change is extremely slow, and lizards continue to suffer terrible conditions all over the world. Experts predict that lizards will most likely not see full equality for at least another 2 lizard generations. A lizard generation is approximately 15 years. Fast forward to the 2024 election for the 46th President of the United States of America. The candidate for the Democratic Party, Steve Buscemi, a first-term senator, goes up against the extremely anti-lizard Republican candidate Gary Busey. Steve is almost universally admired for his folksy, everyday blue-collar demeanor and his inspiring message of change. Steve was mostly quiet about the issue of lizard rights throughout the campaign in order to appease the powerful anti-lizard lobby, but becomes popular within the lizard community, which still can't vote after the LZM officially endorses him for his overall pro-lizard voting record on issues like lizard education and lizard marriage.
Can we ask questions during this?
I think.
This is literally like an extended essay. It's like
Yeah. So
we're not even like a quarter.
Our first question. Okay. So
I'm not even
our
saying
first question. Right. I have a question. So like you said, the lizards are like what? 5% of the U.S. population?
Yeah.
But you talk about them worldwide. Like, how is it worldwide? That was my first question.
Because it's all lizards that ever lived on Earth. So
I thought you said iguanas.
yeah.
Those are not all lizards.
Iguana lizards everywhere.
Okay, wait.
Okay.
And you said a lizard generation is 15 years?
Yeah.
So that means that a lizard lives for 15 years.
Yeah.
That's like the max lifespan.
Yes.
That's 15 years is the max. The average is like what? 10?
Yeah, 15 is
There's like
it'll be like 17 years, some of them, but like most of them live within 15 years.
Wait,
That's not important. Like,
Okay, guys. So to try and like figure out some kind of structure, Ali, you can finish reading, and like you guys can ask questions while he's finished reading. But like I'm gonna only give you another like 3 minutes to finish that, and then they have their question period. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, in November of 2024, with his final landslide, after his inauguration in early 2025, he enjoys initial approval ratings of over 90%. Time magazine makes him Human of the Year, and most people agree that Buscemi will make a great president. But soon after, everything changes. On April 4th, 2025, at the G7 summit in Munich, Buscemi reveals that he isn't actually a human and was a lizard the whole time, wearing a flesh suit, and had lied about his human identity in order to get elected. Lizardgate causes widespread panic.
Okay, wait, so you can't tell if someone's a lizard.
No, and he's wearing a flesh suit.
What?
How
will every
That's unknown. Lizardgate
Why is that
causes
unknown?
widespread panic that causes Lizard Buscemi's approval ratings to fall under 30%. A clear majority of Americans feel that it was wrong for Buscemi to lie about being a human and say that they would not have voted for him if they knew he was a reptile. The anti-lizard lobby claims that Buscemi should step down since lizards should not be allowed to hold public office. However, in Anti-Lizard Americans for Prosperity v. Buscemi, a liberal Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision rules that the Constitution does not explicitly bar non-humans from being the president, and after over 4 years, lizards finally gain the right to vote and hold public office. After that, the Republican anti-lizard congressional caucus attempts to impeach the president for misleading the American people. This challenge, however, is only barely struck down by a coalition of moderates and secret lizard congressmen and women. Despite Buscemi managing to survive these challenges to his power, calls for him to step down grow louder and louder, and public unrest reaches a boiling point, with human riots all over the country targeting innocent lizard communities. Several countries around the world also signaled that they would refuse to cooperate with Buscemi, fearing that a lizard president would inspire their own internal lizard insurgencies. Buscemi's announcement throws the world into a deep recession and kicks off a worldwide violent lizard revolution. Buscemi resigning would probably contribute to ending some of the violent reprisals committed on lizard communities and would restore some stability. Despite all of this, the LRM, Lizard Resistance Movement, urges Steve Buscemi, who loves his fellow lizards but is also a patriot and did not expect this announcement to have such a disastrous consequence, to continue in office. So it's an opt choice. You as Steve Buscemi, do you resign or do you stay in office?
Okay, so now we're starting the question period.
Yeah.
So,
Like, okay, can you read the last 5 sentences again?
Okay.
That was my first question.
So at what part?
The last, okay.
Okay. So despite Buscemi managing to survive these challenges to his power, calls for him to step down, grow louder and louder, and public unrest reaches a boiling point, with human riots all over the country targeting innocent lizard communities. Several countries around the world also signal that they will refuse to cooperate with Buscemi, fearing that a lizard president would inspire their own internal lizard insurgencies. Buscemi's announcement throws the world into a deep recession and kicks off a worldwide violent lizard revolution. Buscemi,
The announcement that he's a lizard,
yeah,
it causes a recession
it does, yeah,
around the world.
yes.
Okay.
So like you said, there's like secret lizard congressmen and women.
Yeah,
How many?
that's unknown, but it's, obviously it was a
Do
group.
people know them?
No, we just know.
Who are we?
Like this hypothetical where we know, and Steve Buscemi, I guess, knows that there are some. He doesn't know how
What is
many.
the balance in the House of Representatives? Is it
Uh,
how Republican, how Democrat?
let's say it's like a slim Republican majority.
How about the Senate?
Same thing.
What year is this? What, like it's 2021, you said?
25.
25.
Yeah, lizards became sentient for 20.
He's a Democrat, right?
Steve Buscemi's a Democrat. Yeah.
So what was like the question again?
It's like, so all of this happens. You as Steve Buscemi, do you resign or do you stay in office?
Okay, yeah, we choose to resign.
You resign? Okay.
okay, great. Without further ado, I invite the Prime Minister to begin this round of debate with a speech not to exceed 7 minutes. Here.
Here, here.
Okay, so to be honest, I gave it very little thought beyond this point, but this is the case basically we've laid out for why you should choose to resign, right? So our first point is basically how you should never buy into the narrative that you're able to subjugate lizards whenever they try to enter institutions of power by threatening violence against them, right? I mean, that's a narrative that's constantly repeated within the general American political culture, right? So whenever a lizard tries to attempt to seek employment, for example, or to seek a home, for example, whenever he tries to engage with American institutions in any meaningful way, he's denied that by state forces, right? I think this is a rare opportunity where a lizard is actually able to succeed in America and was able to get elected, and despite the odds, despite everything being set up against him, was still able to overcome that because of the legitimacy of his own claim to the presidency, and was able to rise above that, right? I think that's an inspiring message to lizards around the world about how this narrative is not true, that lizards can accomplish anything, and I think it would be disastrous for you to squander that opportunity to attack that narrative by resigning, right? Meaning that the first major role model that that lizards can appeal to at a global stage is being seen as someone who was a traitor, who had this enormous power and this opportunity to succeed, and just decided to squander it, right? Because realize that the lizard resistance movement has actively asked you not to resign, right? That means that there is a consensus among lizards, at least now, that you shouldn't resign and it would be a mistake to do so, right? The minute that you do so, you squander any kind of capital that you have with this group and make it less likely that you're going to be accepted later. I think it also means that it's less likely that lizards are going to appeal to institutional means, right? Because the reality is that a lizard revolution is likely to fail, right? And that they only make up 5% of the population and probably fewer numbers than elsewhere. I think it makes it unlikely that this revolution will succeed, meaning that the only way for you to actually achieve credible change is through institutional means, right? The moment that you resign, it's going to likely be replaced by an extremely anti-lizard president. You're likely to be replaced by an extremely anti-lizard president or like a vice president who's like a Democrat and didn't know later. Basically what this means is that you will not get any of the institutional change that you're seeking, but at the point at which you have a figurehead who prefers institutional change and has the capacity to actually reform systems, that makes it less likely that you're going to get violent revolutions at a global scale that will just fail and lead to more lizard lives being lost, right? I think that's important, but it's also important to maintain your relationship with the lizard community and maintaining your role as a role model for these people, right? Secondly, on how to achieve credible change, right? Because realize, yeah, it's the right case. Secondly, on why this is actually the best way of you achieving credible change, right? Because the likeliness is that a lot of public institutions are unlikely to cooperate with you, and that the diplomatic corps will probably not be very cooperative. A lot of public servants will resist you. There might be even some in the military brass that will resist you. The reality is though you as a president still have enormous institutional capacity to achieve change at the point at which you've been actively endorsed by the Supreme Court as being legitimate, right? They also did, in making their decision, they didn't consider the fact that there are many secret lizards spread throughout American institutions that you can capitalize on, right? The moment that you resign, you start a witch hunt against these people and they're going to likely be removed from power. You're the only thing stopping them from being caught and being expelled from these systems, right? It also means that at the point at which you're a president, you're likely to expand and accelerate the rate at which you embed these sleeper cells within American institutions, because you're able to nominate them to critical offices within the government that aren't going to be blocked by by Congress at the point at which there are already plenty lizards, secret lizards in Congress that are likely to cooperate with you and pass your legislation and pass your nominations, right? They didn't engage with that analysis and how that's good at achieving change. If you resign, that's not going to be good, right? I'll take a few items.
Okay, yeah, what's stopping everyone in the House and Senate just from voting you out? Or you being impeached?
Okay, they didn't listen. They tried to impeach you and it failed in the House, right? That clearly shows that they can't do that you're going to likely stay on as president for these full 4 years, and they can't do anything about it until the election happens, right? I don't think they're engaging with that reality at all, right? Thirdly, on how you inspire global change and why that's important, right? Because I think what's important to note is that, firstly, what you do by being elected as president and staying on in that position is you're likely to inspire similar acts elsewhere, where it's like lizards deciding to subvert institutions internally, not necessarily through violence, but for running for office or seeking the right to vote, right? I think that's something that's incredibly critical. You lose that inspiration by showing that it actually was for nothing and was a mistake, right? And it's admittance of the mistake that you made, right? Secondly, I also think that you are able to lobby other countries to achieve institutional change at the point at which the United States is so critical to the global economy and global institutions that these countries, even if they actively hate you, will have no choice but to engage with you and to listen to what you say, right? I think this is in a lot of ways comparative to the Soviet Union and China, who had violent revolutions and violent subversions of their own, and were initially alienated, but eventually were back accepted into the world's fold because there was because people realized that there was no choice but to do that at the point at which they were critical to a lot of global institutions, right? I think similarly, eventually, the global recession will end, and people will decide to cooperate with this, right? At the point at which you also guarantee that if they accept marginal change, that you will call for lizards to stop having violent revolutions. I think it makes it likely that you're going to change these things. Sure.
Okay, so you admitted that you as the president, by revealing this, caused a worldwide recession. That was your fault. Why would countries be willing to engage with you by virtue of the fact that you caused it?
Okay, American presidents do stupid things all the time that lead to disastrous consequences, but eventually people forgive them because they have no choice but to do so, right? I mean, similarly, this will apply in this case. They have no choice but to eventually listen to you, right? Also, I think, fourthly, you basically refuse to engage with the fact that you already achieved enormous change, right? Because your election led to the Supreme Court case that gave lizards the vote and gave them the rights to run for office, right? That was already instrumental change. You squandered that at the point at which you refused to capitalize on that